Go ahead and get welfare, you poor thing." Those were the last words they uttered before leaving. In that moment, as they departed, all strength seemed to drain from my body. I couldn't shake off Greg's earlier words. "While you were indeed independent, I've always felt like my pride as a man has been hurt. From now on, I will build a family with Brandy, so please let's get a divorce." Feeling numb, I signed the divorce papers, signaling my intent to end our marriage. Some time later, I decided to pursue property division. During a meeting with a lawyer, my sister brazenly demanded a share of our assets. However, the lawyer's response caught us off guard. Bursting into laughter, he exclaimed, "Aren't you the one on welfare?" My sister's face turned pale, and she let out a ridiculous scream upon seeing the documents the lawyer placed on the table. "My name is Erin Anderson. My husband Greg and I were married for 18 years. I'm 45 and Greg is 42. We have a daughter named Jenny, who is 17 and in high school. Greg and I met through work at related companies. Initially, I saw Greg as a younger brother figure, but over time, our relationship grew into something more. We had Jenny without serious issues, assuming we'd enjoy our second phase of life once she was grown. That was until my sister Brandy showed up unannounced with a suitcase. Unlike my brother, I've never gotten along with her. She always treated me poorly, taking my things and even stealing my friends and boyfriends. Despite my efforts to avoid her, she interfered with my life at every turn. I moved away, got my real estate license, and built a life in New York, hoping to keep her at a distance. For our wedding, Greg and I opted for a private affair, knowing my sister's tendencies. My parents kept our marriage a secret, but somehow Brandy found out. I was looking forward to time with my husband once Jenny left for college, but then Brandy arrived, disrupting everything. "Wow, Erin, this is a nice house you have here. Did you buy it?" Her voice snapped me back to reality. "There's a room available here. I'll be using this one, thanks," she declared, ignoring my protests. Today was a holiday, Jenny was at school, and Greg was at work. "Could you please leave before they come back?" I pleaded in vain. That evening, both Greg and Jenny returned home to find Brandy there, uninvited. Who might this be?" Greg asked, puzzled. Brandy introduced herself with a charm that belied her true nature. "I'm Erin's sister, Brandy. I found your wedding photos at Mom's and decided to drop by." Greg, aware of my strained relationship with Brandy, looked uncomfortable. Before long, Brandy proposed moving in, claiming she'd been fired and needed a place to stay temporarily. Despite my objections, Greg and Jenny seemed to sympathize with her plight. "If it's just for a little while, I guess it's okay," Greg conceded, much to my dismay. Thus began a turbulent daily routine with my sister, who not only refused to contribute but also started taking money from my wallet without permission. "I've warned you about this behavior," I confronted her one day. "If you need money, at least ask me what you're buying." But Brandy remained defiant. "Why should I report to you? It's my money now." I hoped she would find a job and leave quickly, but she showed no signs of job hunting. Meanwhile, Greg's supposed overtime at work didn't match his salary, raising suspicions that he and Brandy were spending too much time together. I confronted him about it. "Your salary doesn't include overtime, does it? If you can't ask for overtime pay, should I ask on your behalf?" I questioned Greg, trying to keep my voice steady. His response surprised me. "What are you doubting? I'm properly paid for my overtime, separate from my salary." "There's no issue," Greg retorted, his typically mild demeanor replaced with a rare outburst. This sudden change unsettled me deeply, signaling a crisis in our otherwise stable life. Meanwhile, my sister continued to linger around the house, consuming more resources than even Jenny. Frustrated, I discussed the situation with our parents, who apologized for inadvertently revealing our marriage and home to my sister. Despite living far from them, I had hoped to maintain peace with Greg and Jenny, but my sister's intrusion threatened that. She must have been planning to find us the moment she saw our wedding photos. I lamented to myself, fearing she intended to disrupt our lives once more. Doubts crept in about my sister's claim of being fired. Was it possible she quit deliberately to freeload off us and make my life miserable again? If so, I needed to act swiftly to evict her from our home. "You said you were fired, but wouldn't you be eligible for unemployment benefits if you were enrolled in employment insurance?" I confronted her one day. "I've always worked part-time, so I wasn't enrolled in anything like that." "That's why I'm in trouble," she replied defensively, deflecting responsibility onto me as the independent sister. Her nonsensical logic left me speechless. Discovering she had never held a full-time job explained why her job search yielded nothing. 3 months into her stay, my worst suspicions were confirmed when I caught Greg and her having an affair. A meeting was canceled, and I saw them at a cafe, holding hands and chatting happily. I recounted, still reeling from the shock of the betrayal. It's inconceivable for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law to behave like that. Confronting them at home, I exploded with emotion. So the overtime was a lie, huh? Pretending to job hunt while hanging out with Greg. At your age, can't you be satisfied without taking something from me? Greg and Brandy confessed to the affair casually, adding insult to injury. If I had known your sister was such a beautiful woman, I wouldn't have avoided her just because you told me to, Aaron, Greg remarked callously. I've always felt my pride as a man was being hurt. From now on, I want to build a family with Brandy. Let's get a divorce. He slid a prepared divorce paper across the table, filled out in his section. Feeling betrayed and hurt, I knew there was no going back. Fine, there's no way we can rebuild this, I replied, devastated. From now on, I won't support you financially, Brandy. Brandy laughed disdainfully. Go ahead and get welfare, you poor thing, she mocked, her words laced with contempt. Greg added insult to injury. Since custody usually favors the mother, it's better for Jenny to be with you, Aaron. Do whatever you want from now on. With those callous words, they left the house. Minutes later, Jenny returned home, puzzled by the eerie silence that now engulfed our once happy home. When I finally broke the news to Jenny that we were getting a divorce, she initially appeared shocked but soon seemed to accept the situation with a hint of relief. After some time, the divorce was finalized, and I decided to discuss compensation with Greg and Brandy in the presence of a lawyer I had hired. Brandy shamelessly demanded a share of our assets. However, the lawyer's response caught her completely off guard. He burst into laughter and quipped, "Aren't you the one who should be on welfare?" Stunned by the unexpected turn of events, Brandy's face twisted in disbelief, and she let out a ridiculous scream upon seeing the documents the lawyer placed on the table. Her expression turned pale when she realized the truth. It turns out this couple doesn't have the kind of money that can be divided, the lawyer continued bluntly. Brandy looked back and forth between Greg and me, visibly shocked. Greg, too, was surprised to hear that our assets were minimal. Anticipating this moment after discovering Greg and Brandy's affair, I had taken certain actions. As a result, the only cash left between us was a mere $112,000, an amount that seemed unbelievable for a couple celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary. What happened to all your savings, Greg? You had quite a lot, I asked, my tone edged with anger as I saw his panicked expression. You really have no interest in Jenny, do you? We talked about saving for her education, I continued, feeling a surge of frustration. I transferred almost all of our savings to Jenny's account as per our agreement. Greg's complexion paled further as he recalled our conversation. Then what's the breakdown of the $112,000? He asked hesitantly. About 80% of it is probably Greg's secret savings, I replied calmly, meeting his gaze. You knew about it, and you agreed to transfer your savings to Jenny, anticipating this division of property. You even signed the consent form. Greg's expression turned furious as the reality sank in. It seems strange to me why you asked for my consent, just for that, Greg said, his voice tinged with regret as he scratched his head frantically. However, his signature on the documents was irreversible. The lawyer confirmed that Greg's agreement to transfer the funds to Jenny meant it was no longer considered marital savings. I had no intention of letting them benefit from that money, which is why I considered making it a living gift. Upon hearing this, Brandy was dumbfounded but managed to confront Greg. You said we had plenty of savings. Weren't we supposed to live a luxurious life together? Dividing $112,000 won't amount to much. Why didn't you realize Aaron's intentions sooner? Her face paled with reproach, but Greg avoided her gaze and remained silent. Throughout our marriage, Greg had earned little and carried significant student loans, so I had taken on all living expenses. This agreement was made when Greg expressed difficulty in contributing financially. I assured him that I would manage expenses while he focused on saving for our future. After over a decade, Greg believed he had saved at least $100,000 or more. However, when it was revealed the amount was less than $10,000, I felt betrayed when I stumbled upon his bank book and discovered the truth about his savings habits. Now that we're divorced, such matters no longer concern me, I thought bitterly. Brandy, realizing the severity of the situation, trembled slightly, unsure of her next move. With only $112,000 available for division and seeing her confusion, I decided to reveal another truth. Looking directly at Greg, I spoke hesitantly. I debated whether to mention this, but Greg, aren't you planning to quit your job? Greg was visibly shaken. How do you know? I only discussed it with my boss, he stammered, glancing around nervously. I suspected it after noticing no overtime pay and a peculiar section on the payroll slip. I explained calmly. It concerned your increased use of paid leave. You've never taken more than the minimum required days off. But recently, you've taken a large block of paid leave at once. It typically indicates resignation. I paused, letting the revelation sink in. I've been suspecting an affair for some time. Did you plan to quit, hoping for a substantial payout after the divorce? I asked pointedly. To my surprise, my suspicions hit the mark perfectly. I couldn't help but sigh at Greg's overly optimistic thinking. Well, you were my husband, so you should at least know what job I do and how much wealth I've accumulated. To think you relied on that, cheated, and even chose to resign. You really haven't thought this through, I remarked, watching Greg's face turn red with embarrassment. The lawyer's earlier remark to Brandy about welfare hit a nerve. If two unemployed individuals come together, they end up on welfare unless they work, he pointed out. Flustered by this realization, Brandy suddenly shouted, "Wait a minute. If you can prepare for Jenny's college expenses and cover living costs all by yourself, there must be something fishy. I get it, you're hiding assets, right? That's the only explanation. Come on, confess now." Greg seemed to have a sudden realization. That's right, Brandy. Actually, Aaron owns a lot of real estate. We'll have to divide those assets too. Close call. I almost got tricked, he admitted. Watching them laugh about their assumptions, I was dumbfounded. The lawyer couldn't help but chuckle at their ignorance, but the tension in the room was palpable. Clearing his throat, he began to speak plainly. If we're talking about the division of property, Greg, as the ex-husband, you should know that Aaron owns real estate through her company, which generates profit. A corporation and an individual are separate entities. Aaron's company and its assets cannot be divided as marital property, the lawyer explained calmly. Realizing their mistake, Greg and Brandy turned red and fell silent. The lawyer continued, what can be considered for division are things like cars, houses, and cash savings. Moreover, Greg and Brandy have virtually admitted to their affair, allowing Aaron to demand compensation from both of you. At the mention of compensation, their faces contorted in disbelief. Isn't that too high? It was just a few months. Affair, they protested, trying to justify their actions. I countered immediately, who decided that the market rate is just a reference? Greg, you took leave to secretly date my sister, and she didn't even bother to properly job hunt, choosing instead to live off my money. The lawyer, remaining objective, decided on the compensation amount, $10,000 from Greg and $3,000 from Brandy. Shocked by the turn of events, they hastily shook their heads in agreement. The discussion couldn't be concluded in one day and was adjourned. 2 weeks later, we reconvened for further discussions. Brandy, with a defiant attitude, demanded, "Give me the house and the regular car. Is that what you call compensatory property division? Then give Greg his $122,000, and I'll pay the remaining $1,000. Hearing such nonsensical demands, I was on the verge of yelling in anger, but I managed to control myself with reason and slowly sorted out the situation. The house still had a mortgage and required regular maintenance, so it would retain some value if sold. The car was relatively new, purchased just 5 years ago. Accepting my sister's proposal would mean a loss for me, which I absolutely did not want. Sister, did you even do the math? If you consider selling the house and car, you wouldn't say such things. Usually it's not the cheating party, you guys. Who should be making these demands? It's me, I asserted firmly. As I pondered how brazen they could be, Greg, sitting next to my sister, interjected, overlapping my words. You own assets worth $170 million in the company, right? I don't care if you're some real estate mogul or whatever, but being so stingy with all that wealth is just insane. Caught off guard for a moment, I ended up laughing at their absurdity given the situation. Seeing me suddenly burst into laughter made the two of them freeze. After a good laugh, I returned to a serious expression. So, is that all you wanted to say? And why are you acting like you're the victims here? I asked, maintaining a firm tone. I'd rather be stingy than give any money to a man who abandons his daughter for an affair or to the worst kind of sister who steals her sibling's husband. I'd rather secure as much as possible for Jenny, I added pointedly. They flinched at my words. I wanted to tell them to study more about legal terms if they wanted to use them. What were they even thinking, saying such things? I planned to dismantle their delusions bit by bit. Greg, this house is under my name, right? It's my separate property since I bought it with a mortgage before we got married. No matter how you twist it, it remains mine, I clarified firmly. The car, bought new and accident-free, is of a model that sells well. If you want it, you'll have to pay me half its appraised value. That's how property division works. Brandy, clueless about legal nuances, and Greg, who hadn't thought it through, were landing themselves in trouble again. Greg pleaded with me after showing some semblance of thought. Can you just give us enough money to start our new life? Please? Greg's apology seemed superficial. It was clear he just wanted to solve the immediate problem. I don't need such a shallow apology, I steeled my heart and responded firmly. Given your attitude, it seems like you wouldn't want to pay for Jenny's child support either. There's not a single thing I'm willing to compromise on. Why should I have to worry about your living expenses? I firmly stated my position, and realizing they couldn't persuade me further, they reluctantly signed the necessary documents. Sometime after the divorce and property division were settled, Brandy called me repeatedly, complaining. "Why does Greg have so much debt? Weren't you paying the living expenses? What's going on?" she questioned heatedly over the phone. I patiently explained the reality to her. That should have been obvious when it came out that he only had less than $10,000 saved, despite having years to save. Maybe he made some big purchases on credit or something like that. As I asked this, Brandy eagerly shared her situation. Yes, he took loans of several thousand to buy nonsensical brand items. It turns out his credit card was set to revolving payments without him knowing, making a huge mess. So this guy is just a debt disaster. How could you push such a person onto me? You're the one who stole him, remember? I retorted with a half laugh, and Brandy fell silent. It seemed Greg had been accumulating debts I wasn't even aware of. Now, demand letters were arriving in droves. He must have been careless with his address change, or perhaps in the chaos of starting a new life, he forgot to hide them. "Oh, and there's one more thing I haven't told you, Brandy," I added, noting her distress. Greg mentioned he was working in construction now as a sole proprietor. While this meant his income and residence taxes were deducted, he was responsible for managing other necessary payments himself. Being self-employed, I handle my national pension and health insurance. When Greg left his job in real estate, I made arrangements for Jenny to be covered by the national health insurance as well. I took care of my taxes and such, but it turned out Greg hadn't paid his national pension for a year since he switched jobs, I explained calmly. I was covering the health insurance, so there was no issue there. Due to some mistake, a national pension demand notice was sent to our house. I contacted Greg and got his permission to open it, and it was indeed a demand notice he had been hiding all along, and I hadn't noticed. I continued. I pay my own national pension and assumed Greg was paying his. When I called Greg about opening the demand notice, he almost cried and begged for help. I recounted. "National pension costs that much? You're kidding, right? I can't pay this. We were a family, weren't we? Can't you do something, please?" Greg had pleaded. "What nerve to say that?" I responded sharply. "The very person who abandoned his wife and child is asking for help." My logic left Greg speechless again. Realizing there was no way out, Brandy seemed to lose all hope over the phone as well. "So we'll have to figure it out yourselves," I concluded, ending the call. Eventually, Greg called, complaining about the high taxes on the car I had taken and how expensive the vehicle inspection was. Maintaining a car costs this much. I thought taxes were just a few dollars, but they're in the hundreds, and the vehicle inspection cost so much. Greg lamented. "Ah, it's tough, isn't it? Can't you take it back?" he asked, hoping for a solution. After I curtly refused, Greg hung up, deflated. He kept sending emails asking for help. But when I warned him that any more harassment would lead me to report him for stalking, he stopped. Brandy and Greg were in for a tumultuous divorce. They couldn't finalize it because of petty arguments. Eventually, Greg chose to declare bankruptcy. Unaffected by me since I had already collected the lump sum compensation, Greg ended up jobless and penniless, leading to homelessness. His pride prevented him from applying for welfare. Brandy, who faced divine retribution after stealing her sister's husband and divorcing within 3 months, saw her social relationships crumble. Disowned by family and relatives, she struggled with job hunting due to her attitude. Even when she managed to get part-time jobs, her domineering nature and refusal to accept fault led to immediate dismissals. The lawyer's warning about welfare became a reality. Clinging to her possessions, Brandy was ineligible for welfare, evicted from her apartment, and became homeless like Greg. They trampled on the feelings of both me and Jenny with their selfish actions, so this punishment was only natural, I reflected. Now it's just the two of us living together, but our days haven't changed much. Jenny said she felt relieved after Greg, who never did anything for her yet always complained about studying and going to a good university, was gone. Then she splendidly passed the entrance exam to an Ivy League university. Seeing my daughter about to start her college life this fall fills me with renewed emotion, I concluded. As I near 46, busy in a good way with work and still healthy, I'm motivated to keep pushing forward.